challenges with conserving the state's most crucial resource.
Water is the arbiter of growth.
Power changes hands in Mexico, how it could affect relations with Arizona.
So we expect to see changes very soon.
A milestone moment in a historic mission to understand our planet's origins.
Perhaps these asteroids provided the building blocks for life on Earth.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. It already looks like water conservation will become a top issue in 2019. In an op-ed this week, Governor Doug Ducey said he wants next year's budget to include an additional $30 million to protect water levels in Lake Mead. Among the lawmakers considering that proposal, Republican Russell Bowers. Next year, he will take the helm as Speaker of the House. And for some time, he has helped shape water policy in Arizona. Vanessa Barchfield recently spoke to Bowers about the issue.
We would like to have and have to have a drought plan, a drought contingency plan for the state of Arizona that also works with the other states in the lower basin and upper basin. That plan will guide what we do in times of shortage, which we face now.
Forecasters say there's a nearly 60% chance that a shortage will be declared on Lake Mead in 2020. Since this summer, state water leaders have been negotiating a drought plan, under which Arizona would agree to take larger cuts of water when shortage is declared. In exchange, California, Nevada, and Mexico would also reduce their use of Colorado River water. The negotiation has been contentious, and state lawmakers will need to approve the plan.
As we've mentioned, certainty in water is a good thing, and uncertainty in water is not good for economics and families and just about anything.
Over the past year, Bowers and Republican State Senator Gail Griffin held a series of listening sessions on water topics around the state.
What were some of the things that you learned, or some major themes that kept coming up?
A problem theme is that people see water sources as local. This is our water in Cochise County. This is our water in Yuma. This is our water in Mojave. And we don't want you guys to take it. And we don't own water. We own the rights to use water.
Farmers in central Arizona stand to lose their water under the drought plan when a shortage is declared. The state has scrambled to find alternate sources to fill part of the void. But the long-term plan for Pinal County is for development. Cochise County also has a number of controversial developments in the works, and critics say there's just not enough water.
How should the state be balancing between growth and the need for water conservation?
Well, all growth should bring with it conservation practices. Sustainability is this overwhelming description that many times is lost because it's so tenuous. But water sustainability in a desert environment is critical. And we solicit and have seen big companies vastly improving their water usage. And we see it everywhere. And yet, on the other hand, we still demand for dust prevention that we run water on the dirt and watch it evaporate. And that blows my mind, you know. So the growth needs to be smart, wise, and have conservation as an ethic relative to water.
Will there be a point at which limited water resources do slow growth in the state?
Yeah, there will. Every biome has its holding capacity. And we have artificially extended the holding capacity of a desert. That's Salt River Project's function, was to make it possible for us to live here. We wouldn't without it. And ultimately, if we don't augment the supplies we have, yeah, it's very limiting. When we had the no growth initiatives, a decade ago plus, much of that was that we would all be red tile roofs all the way to here to California. And I said, oh no, we won't. There's not enough water. Water is the arbiter of growth.
Bowers says one of his priorities will be finding the funding and support for seawater desalination, which could provide a new source of water for Arizona. But desalination is an expensive and energy-intensive technology and comes with its own controversy. Desalination plants are often powered with fossil fuels, which emit greenhouse gases and contribute to climate change. And that only intensifies the threat against our main source of water, the Colorado River.
Scientists estimate that around 50% of the decline of the Colorado River is caused by climate change. Yet Arizona hasn't been introducing any comprehensive plan to reduce emissions. So I wanted to get your stance on climate change. I mean, do you believe in the science that says
I believe that
humans are
climates change. I believe that climate is changing. And it really doesn't matter in this context because the time frame for climate change isn't, well, I remember in this very chamber when we were talking about getting rid of the stuff that, the refrigerant, and I can't remember what it's called now, senior moment. But because it would say the ozone hole over the Antarctic was growing. Well, haven't heard a thing about it. We still have it. There's still an Antarctic. There's still lots of ice. But the planet is, in fact, experiencing climate change. And if it happens here more than it is now, we will have to adapt to it or move elsewhere.
A recent report from the UN shows that we have until 2040 to actually reverse some of these effects of climate change, and we can do so by reducing our emissions. Do lawmakers here in the state of Arizona, which is really in the thick of it in terms of climate change, do you see lawmakers having a responsibility to take some actions to reduce emissions?
In fact, the emissions are reducing, much of it because of the economics of travel, and most of the emissions come from automobiles still. Why? All of them reduce much, much less than they used to. We just buy more of them. So the offset that way, we could say, we're going to make sure that nobody has more than a two-seater car. It's the effects of climate change, if it's done by me, are going to be felt about 5 years from now. It's not immediate. It's not like a causal link between me and the butterflies in the Amazon. It's a time adapting challenge. And so making that pitch, it's all about what can be accomplished, what is the economic viability and capability of a people to adapt to the implications of lower emissions, whatever that means, because we have cranked down a lot on emissions.
According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Arizona was one of 9 states nationwide where emissions rose between 2000 and 2015. Between those years, CO2 emissions increased by 5%. While much of the focus is on the Colorado River water, many communities in southern Arizona rely on groundwater, and it's another source that is at risk. A recent study found groundwater supplies nationwide fall short of previous estimates. We learn more from the findings from Jennifer McIntosh, one of the study's researchers and a hydrology professor at the University of Arizona. How did you conclude that our groundwater is in peril?
Good question. So we investigated the depth of potable groundwater across the United States, and we compared that to the depth of existing water wells. And what we show is the depth of those water resources underground is about half of what was previously estimated in earlier studies.
Sounds like we should be concerned.
Yeah, so we not only looked at that groundwater is being depleted from the top down, but we also investigated how groundwater is being depleted from the bottom up. So we think of it as the window of groundwater resources that could be used for humans or agriculture is shrinking both from the top as well as the bottom.
There's a term that is in your research that I wasn't quite familiar with, but there's fresh water and then there's brackish water. What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, so fresh water is something that we would drink, so it's not very salty. Brackish water is important to consider because it's slightly saline, so more salty than fresh water, but less salty than seawater. So it's potential that we could use that brackish water in the future as water resources become scarce. We could desalinate that brackish water and use it for drinking water. In some cases, it's already being used, like in the oil and gas industry. So it's also a water resource that we should consider.
What are some of the challenges when you continue to dig for water, though, to find these resources?
That's a good question. So it depends on how deep they are. So that's something that our study was trying to probe and get a sense of how deep you could find these water resources. There's also questions about how we might be able to extract those water resources, and so how easy it is to get them out of the ground. And that very much depends on the geography, what the sediments are like underground that these waters are stored in.
Arizona has a pretty diverse geography. Are there some areas that are perhaps easier than others?
That's a good question. It's true, it varies across the state. So there's some locations where there's relatively saline groundwater close to the surface, say associated with the Wilcox Playa, where there's other parts of the state, say in the Tucson Basin, that you might be able to drill much deeper and find fresh and brackish groundwater.
And on that note, we have some aquifers that are more robust than others, for example, in Cochise County. What are some of the factors that can contribute to that?
So I think of the robustness of aquifers has to do with not only the quantity of the water, and that again has to do with the geology and what the aquifer's characteristics are like, how easy it is to get the water out of the ground, but also what the salinity of the water is, and that was something that we looked at in our study.
That also has to do with the nearby mountain ranges, is that correct?
Well, the nearby mountain ranges are incredibly important in Arizona because those are our water towers, so that's where a lot of the water infiltrates into our aquifers.
Overall, across the nation, some of our rural populations are declining, or where people live are declining. Does that help this case in that reference, given that Cochise County, for example, is more rural? If we have less people living there, there's not so much pressure placed on the aquifer.
Well, in the state of Arizona, the vast majority of groundwater depletion or extraction is for agriculture. So it's actually not domestic water use. And there's huge agribusinesses in rural parts of Arizona. And we've seen major declines in the levels of groundwater throughout Arizona in these rural places because of extraction of the water for irrigated agriculture.
I think sometimes in the agriculture world, there's a conversation that if you can afford to continue digging a deeper well, you'll have more access. Is that a right attitude to have about this process?
Well, it's interesting and important to talk about because we can potentially extract deeper groundwater in the state of Arizona, but that groundwater is fossil, meaning it was recharged thousands of years ago. And so we're extracting the water, it's not going to be replenished anytime soon. So you could think of it as mining groundwater.
What's the level of regulation over groundwater right now? Does it need to increase or expand right now? Is this the appropriate time to talk about that?
Well, policy is not my area, but looking at, say, in contrast, the Tucson Basin, it's part of an active management area. So groundwater is actively managed, along with half of our water coming from the Colorado River. In rural parts of Arizona, like Cochise County, there's not that groundwater management. And in those areas, we've seen huge declines in regional water tables.
As Mexico's newly inaugurated president settles into office, many are watching and waiting to see how he will get along with President Trump and how his policy will shape ties with border states like Arizona. Days before Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador assumed power, his predecessor, Enrique Peña Nieto, signed on to the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. Javier Osorio says the new president will likely honor the deal. Osorio is an associate professor at the U of A School of Government and Public Policy. We turn to him for insight. How quickly do you suspect that we'll actually see changes? As we know, Arizona and Mexico are very good trading partners, but will we start to see any sort of transformation soon?
I think so. The economy moves very fast. As you order something on Amazon or you buy something in the supermarket, that is because there's a chain of economic products putting together to deliver that to the consumers on both sides. So we expect to see changes very soon into the different markets that were discussed.
How closely has he been monitoring this asylum situation that's coming from Guatemala up to Mexico? In my personal experience covering this area recently, it appears that asylum seekers are treated differently in Mexico since in the last few weeks, and it may be because of his leadership.
Yes, absolutely. The outgoing president, Peña Nieto, faced this problem at the very end of his administration, as any other, in political terms, actor called a lame dog. He was on his way out, so he didn't really invest political resources into really dealing with this situation and left the problem for the incoming president. And the first act of his administration, the 1st of December, when he took office, was to sign an agreement with the presidents of El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, that's right, to create a regional approach to address migration. To address immigration from two perspectives. One, to create economic opportunities and employment to prevent the expulsion of poor people into the US, and also to regulate migration in a more secure, steady, institutionalized manner. And part of that includes the protection of asylum seekers who are getting shelter in Mexico with a very different approach. It's not law enforcement in a punitive, repressive manner, but in a human rights protection manner.
On the issue of safety and security of Mexico with respect to targeting drug cartels, this is something he says he wants to get a hold of. How likely is that? How dangerous is it for him to take that approach?
At the beginning, the incoming President Lopez Obrador, he approached it in a very different manner, saying we're going to address the causes as well as the symptoms. The causes are corruption and poverty. That includes possibly the decriminalization of marijuana and poppy production, and offering peasants, cultivators, a substitution of crops to promote economic development instead of cultivating illegal crops. As part of that initial speech, he said that he was going to withdraw the army from fighting cartels. He said, I will not fight fire with fire. Right? He promoted a different approach. Before taking office, he did a very important nationwide tour visiting victims of violence, and apparently it became evident to him that it was not wise to withdraw the army. Now he's taking a different turn. He said that instead of pulling the army back to the barracks, actually he was going to empower them, which is something very dangerous. He said that he was going to create a National Guard, putting together military, Navy, and federal police forces together under the command of the military. Instead of having a civilian command, it will be a military command. And that is very worrisome for large sectors of the population, and civil society has been responding very strongly against that proposition. Now he said, well, let me consult the people. Let's call a referendum to see if people agree on creating a National Guard under the command of the military. So the signals are mixed, are confusing. We don't know exactly what is going to happen. There are some positive aspects of tackling the root causes of violence and crime, which has to do a lot with poverty and inequality. But the immediate part of responding to the ongoing threat and violence of criminal cartels, we are not sure how is he going to handle that.
Do you think that challenges the way his supporters will view him moving forward?
Well, that opens lots of dynamics in the political realm. He certainly has the support of really broad sectors of the population, but it's easy to get lost in that popularity, right? Especially when you start not delivering the things that you promise, that popularity can vanish and turn very rapidly against you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
For more on the inauguration of President Manuel Lopez Obrador, I am joined by Rodrigo Cervantes. He's the Mexico City Bureau Chief for KJZZ. Rodrigo, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Rodrigo, we have a large delegation of Arizonans who attended the inauguration, everyone from the governor to business leaders, political consultants. Were there other states who had such a presence? And what does that mean for Arizona to be there on this very important day?
Well, we had what was probably the largest commission of people coming from the United States in the history of Mexican inaugurations. We're talking of more than 140 people from different delegations from all over the United States. Of course, there were border states that were represented. We had obviously Arizona with Governor Ducey. We also had the interim mayor of the city of Phoenix. We had the governor of California, New Mexico, but there was also the governor of Montana and many other business leaders here. This tells you about the importance that this moment has for the United States and for its relationship with Mexico. There is definitely, if not a concern, a huge interest to keep a good relationship with Mexico and also to keep growing the commercial ties with it.
President Lopez Obrador has said that Mexico cannot be a rich country with poor people. He wants to increase the minimum wage. Right now it's about 80 pesos a day, which translates into just under $5 a day for minimum wage. He also wants to increase the border-free trade zone. How likely is that to affect change and keep Mexicans in their country, which he has said is what they want to do?
It's going to be very interesting, the entire project that Andrés Manuel López Obrador has, particularly for this free trade zone and the border, where he's expecting to increase minimum wages. He's also expecting to lower the cost of energy such as gas, and he even mentioned in his official speech that he wants to make this area as competitive as the border states from the United States. Now, this area, let's remember, it is also very interesting and complex because on one hand, you already have very strong industries such as the maquiladoras, but also the immigration tensions and the recent migration that we're seeing from not only from Central America, but also from the Caribbean. There are many migrants that are staying in these border areas. Nobody really knows what's going to be the effect here, and in fact, the plan is expected to get clarified in the next few months.
Rodrigo, we have had presidents who have said this in the past, leaders who have said, I want to do this for the people of my country. Are some individuals moving into this with some cautious optimism because they've been told these things before?
Definitely. Let's remember that Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador won for a margin of a little bit more than 50% of voters. That means that the other half of the Mexicans that were able to participate and vote are skeptical on Lopez Obrador's approaches. There are very interesting also messages that Lopez Obrador is sending, for instance, on how he's going to handle the economy and global trade. On one hand, in his official inaugural speech, he said that he embraces the relationship with the United States and with Canada. But then on the other hand, he was very strongly opposed to neoliberal policies, which in fact include free trade. So there's a lot of questions on how is the Lopez Obrador formula going to play for Mexico.
And let's talk about partisan politics, because in September, before he was inaugurated, he visited places like Nogales, Sonora, with a different leadership in place, the PRI governor there. What is his motivation to improve outreach to places like Arizona or Sonora? Because he says he would like to return, and that puts us in the spring, perhaps.
Definitely. It is quite clear that for the Mexican government, it is very important their relationship with the United States. The new Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Marcelo Ebrard, is in fact visiting the United States at this point, and there is definitely the intention to increase the potential of the border zone. So they know the importance that this has for trade, for the Mexican economy, and also for the good relationship with the neighbor of the north.
Okay, Rodrigo Cervantes joining us from Mexico City, the bureau chief for KJZZ. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
About 500 meters in diameter, we inferred its shape from our radar data that we took when it came by in 2000.
A spacecraft on a U of A-led mission to collect a sample from an asteroid arrived at its target this week.
We have arrived.
Scientists celebrated the arrival of OSIRIS-REx at the asteroid Bennu. This moment was years in the making. You'll remember the unmanned spacecraft launched back in 2016, and it won't return to Earth until 2023. We learned more about the mission's next steps from image processing lead scientist Danny Dell'Agostina. How would you describe Bennu? What are some of the characteristics of this asteroid?
So Bennu has an unusual shape. It has a kind of spinning top shape. So around its equator, it kind of bulges out a little bit. And it's about as large as, for example, the Push Ridge Wilderness. If that gives some people in southern Arizona a visual cue. Or you could also think about it as about as tall as the Empire State Building. It's very dark. It's approximately the same darkness as coal, so it only reflects about 4% of the sunlight that encounters its surface. And what we've been learning throughout this approach phase leading up to arrival at Bennu is that its surface is pretty rocky. So it has a lot of boulders and material that we're going to need to avoid when we eventually choose a sampling site on the surface.
For the next year and a half, OSIRIS-REx will continue to collect data and images of the asteroid. It will help scientists select a site on Bennu where the spacecraft can collect samples from.
We don't actually land on the surface when we take a sample of Bennu. We just slowly descend and what we call a tag maneuver or a touch and go maneuver. We collect the sample and then we back out and we move to a safe distance from the asteroid to confirm that we've actually gathered something and achieved mission success. So one thing that is really cool and unprecedented is just how high resolution we are mapping the surface of this asteroid. By the end of the phase of the mission where we're evaluating the 2 different candidate sample sites, we'll be able to resolve an object the size of a penny on the surface of the asteroid.
Now this is the big question. What are you hoping Bennu teaches you and us about how we got here?
So very dark primitive asteroids like Bennu are thought to contain some of the precursors for life. So they are rich in organic materials, amino acids, water, and there's even some ideas that the water that we have here on Earth was delivered by asteroids like Bennu. So as we study its surface and its composition, and then we bring a portion of its surface back to Earth, we're really hoping to confirm that maybe perhaps these asteroids provided the building blocks for life on Earth and potentially throughout the solar system.
Okay, let's fast forward to 2023. That's a date that you're anxiously looking forward to. Take me there. What do we expect then?
So in September of 2023, OSIRIS-REx will have completed its journey back home to Earth after acquiring a sample, and that sample will get delivered to a test range facility in Utah. And so at that time, the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft will release the sample return capsule. It'll make its way down to the Utah test range, and there will be a group of scientists and engineers there ready to collect that sample and make sure that it's safe and bring it to our sample curation facility at the NASA Johnson Space Flight Center.
A mission like this certainly puts the University of Arizona, or keeps the University of Arizona, I should say, on the map, right?
That's right.
Okay. Can you give us any insight into the significance of the university's involvement and what this could mean for future exploration?
Yeah, so the University of Arizona was the first public university that led a mission to Mars, and that was during the Phoenix Mars mission. And now we're going to be the first public university to lead a mission to an asteroid. And so it's unprecedented for public universities to carry the flag in these sort of grand scale planetary exploration efforts, and it provides just unparalleled access to opportunities for the students here at the U of A. And I mean, a lot of the experience I gained as an undergraduate here at the University of Arizona is what enabled me to have a career in the space sciences, and so I'm very happy that we can pass that on to the next generation.
Okay, well said. Thank you so much, Danny.
Thank you.
That's all for now. Thanks for joining us. To get a look at next week's program, visit us on social media and let us know what you think. We'll see you next week.